Good evening, and you're very welcome to Business and Enterprise here on Cavan TV. Today, as you know, is December the 5th. It's budget day here in Ireland. So, to go through some of the details and get some handle on what has been said today, I'm joined this evening by Colm Dolan, local accountant and expert in all these matters. Colm, you're very welcome to the programme.
Good evening, Colm. Thank you.
In a nutshell, is it a good budget or a bad budget?
Yes.
I remember years ago we had fantastic budgets. There was lashing money out, but the difference between a good budget and a bad budget now isn't as obvious.
Well, in the context of all those good budgets which were lashing money out, this is one of the. It is taking money, taking 3.5 billion out of the economy in terms of additional taxes and spending cuts. So in that sense, it's not a good budget. Having said that, there are many areas within the budget which provide cause for hope, and we see quite a number of measures where they are pointed at stimulating activity, stimulating new jobs. So yes, I would be hopeful that it is a budget that can create a difference and make a difference.
What are some of the headline issues?
The main headlines in it are that in terms of basic taxes, income taxes, there hasn't been any change in income tax rates or tax credits, which is good news. In terms then of PRSI, there have been some changes there in order to broaden the base for PRSI. So there are additional items of income and new sectors of people who will have to pay PRSI in the future who have not been caught for PRSI in the past. As an example, I would instance PAYE earners who will now be liable for tax in a situation where they have a rented property. So in that sense, new persons caught. Universal social charge, the base for universal social charge has also been broadened, and one of the sectors that has been pulled in there are some of our older members of our population who had a cap at 4% for PRSI on their earnings in excess of €15,000. They're now going to be subject to universal social charge at the normal rate, same rate as everybody else. So there has been an equalisation there.
You just said that there's no increase in tax. Sorry, I know you mean tax rates, but at the end of the day, I suppose for convenience, they have tax split up into tax, PRSI, and universal service. What's
universal social charge.
Social charge.
Yes.
It's not a tax. It
is all tax.
I suppose if everything was put in as tax, and like our standard rate of tax was whatever it is, 50 odd or 20 odd, when you include them in, people would kind of then know what's really happening. But yes. The government, and I say that as a card-carrying member of Fine Gael, are boasting that, well, we haven't touched the tax rates. But what people are paying is going up. So it's really on the smoke and mirrors.
To an extent, yes. I suppose the tax system, this past, the current budget and the past budget, the endeavour has been to broaden the tax base. So areas that hadn't been caught for tax or PRSI or universal social charge are now slowly being pulled in. In other cases, reliefs that had enabled people to avoid paying tax are being eliminated or are being curtailed. So there, for instance, there's a high earners relief or a high earners system in order to limit the amount of reliefs for investment in tax incentive property. Though the cutback of those reliefs has brought more income of high earners into the tax net than had been the case in the past.
I'm just thinking of everything that is paid between PRSI, this universal social charge, income tax. Where I get petrol from Baileyburn, there's the little plaque on the wall, and it's basically a litre of petrol. and it's the percentage the government take, the percentage that the distributor gets, and a little bit 3% down for the retailer.
Yes.
It would kind of be in, and it doesn't break it down any further than that. It's just tax, distributor,
Yes.
and retailer. And we'd be very interested to do an analogy on average earnings
Yes.
of what's in tax and what's left for you at the end of the day, and then because we do anything now with computer models, if we could then kind of factor in all the other things that we pay as well. In other words, what we're taxed on our after-tax pay, and actually what we're actually left with, what percentage. I'm sure if actually somebody did that, we'd all be frightened.
Well, I suppose just to take the point that you're trying to make, income tax, PSI and universal social charge are collected at source, and you don't really have a choice in terms of paying them, whereas sales taxes like value-added tax and excise tax on petrol and VRT on cars, you have a choice whether to buy or whether not to buy. So it is important to recognise that difference, and that for the person getting their week's pay when this budget is fully implemented, the hit on their pocket out of their week's pay will not be hugely significant or substantial, but it's when they then go to spend that money on goods and services that they will find that they're paying tax through the other mechanisms by which tax is collected.
If you're a politician, I might argue the difference between having to run a car and whether it's a choice or not. But as you know, if we're down in rural countries, it often isn't much of a choice. Anyway, some of the other issues.
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the incentives that were there were several incentives to try and stimulate small and medium-sized enterprises to expand and improve their businesses. A corporation tax relief had been introduced a number of years ago to leave the first €300,000 of income from those companies free of corporation tax. However,
first 300,000.
Yes. Now, very, very few companies could avail of that because the relief was time constrained. It only applied to the first 3 years in business. The present budget has extended that time relief to leave it unlimited, and I think that is a really valuable relief in that. For any business which retains its profit within the company, those profits can be reinvested in new assets, new equipment, and additional workers to extend and promote the business.
That's one of the good. Any other good bits?
Yeah, the amount that companies and businesses can write off for research and development has been increased from €100,000 to €200,000. And that measure, I think it, in conjunction with the renewed interest in science and technology, is, from a business perspective, is going to backbone what we're talking about there, in that companies and businesses are now greater incentivized to invest in that area.
And there's changes to, not in the rates of VAT, but in how VAT is calculated on what's the terminology I'm trying
on
to
a cash receipts basis.
On a cash receipts basis, that has gone up.
Yes, the threshold for
you might just explain. You might just explain exactly what that means.
Yeah, for small businesses, they can account for VAT on their sales takings in two ways. They can account for VAT when they raise the invoice to their customer. However, as we all know, if you're giving 60 days credit to your customer and the customer then takes another 30 days to pay, it is 90 days then before you get paid. However, under the sales invoice system, the seller has got to pay VAT at the time that he raises the invoice, notwithstanding that he's got to wait 2 or 3 months before he receives the cash from his customer. Under this system, the cash receipt system, for traders whose annual turnover is 1.25 million or less, they can actually account for the VAT when they receive the money from their customers. So that's a major cash flow advantage. It's not a tax saving, it's merely a cash flow advantage, and it avoids those small businesses who are finding difficulty generating working capital finance from banks, which is already checking loan applications with a fine-tooth comb. It just leaves it easier for those businesses to extend and expand, and with the goodwill of the Revenue Commissioners.
Absolutely. Just on that, did anything come up today on the microfinancing, or is that put to bed? That's up and running now, is it?
Yeah, microfinance. There has been the National Treasury Management Agency. They have been tasked with providing funding for small and micro businesses, and that's good news.
Yeah, but there was no changes, no additions.
No,
this week.
No significant additions.
The AVCs.
AVCs. That's
a good point. Again, people are struggling in business and struggling in life, and have been packing money on top of their pensions away and couldn't get at it. Now they can. Are there snags? Is there a downside
AVCs,
to that?
an AVC is an additional voluntary contribution. It's situations where people in the past have contributed to their pension fund at amounts greater than the normal monthly contribution. They can now access up to 30% of that fund and use the funds within their business to extend it and expand it. And the withdrawal of the funds from the pension fund, while it is subject to income tax, nevertheless, it's putting money to work that otherwise is just lying dormant in a pension fund at the present time, and will continue to lie dormant in that pension fund until that entrepreneur reaches retirement age. So really, we're giving the opportunity here to entrepreneurs who can create and facilitate projects, ventures, and give them risk capital to get things moving again.
Two things spring to mind. First of all, you say it stays there until the entrepreneur reaches retirement age, but with the way pension funds have been going, a lot of people are reaching retirement age and it's not there. And also, other people have said, well, look, when I retire, I'm going to have this pile of money. It's going to be great. Yes. But if something doesn't turn around in the next couple of months, couple of weeks, couple of days, couple of years, I'll never get that far. So people do need the money now. Are there conditions attached to it, or has that come out yet? Is it only for the likes of, well, you can do it to put into your business, or you can put it into X amount of business, or can you just pay off a debt, get somebody off your back? If the Viper comes knocking on your door, is it a good way of accessing it?
The big broad print in the Minister's speech today hasn't put parameters on how the money can be used. So yes, it seems to me as if it is available to pay off debt or pay down debt. It might also be available to stimulate consumer spending. However, I'm not sure about that because the Minister's speech isn't that specific.
A political speech, not specific. Oh, you must be mistaken. That's the good. That's some of the good news. So we'll go back to some of the bad ones. Let's stick to good news.
Before we finish on that, from a farming perspective, and again, there has been some stimulation and some measures introduced there to encourage young trained farmers. In terms of the extension of stock relief for them, has been extended for another 3 years. Stock relief is a relief that's available to farmers to invest in greater numbers of livestock or better quality, more expensive livestock. And that stock relief, the extension of it, again is, in my view, a significant stimulating factor. The Minister also today mentioned that he's extending the types of partnerships that farmers can get involved with their farming neighbours in in terms of beef partnerships and milk partnerships. Again, these are entities which, with two people coming together, perhaps one with a lot of assets and one with a lot of farming expertise, can put together a more viable farming entity. And again, today in the minister's speech, there has been more encouraging news for that. Similarly, the transfer of farms from the older generation to the next generation, it also has a tax relief, a once-off tax relief introduced or announced in today's budget, again to encourage the transfer of farms and farm agricultural land to younger farming participants.
And it's partnerships among farmers, obviously. I'm a little out of me depth when I'm only down here 8 years, so I haven't gotten the whole swing of this agricultural business. But it's partnerships among farmers. I know I've often seen, because again, I live in the middle of nowhere, so I have a couple of farmers around me, and I've often saw them helping each other out. One would have a tractor, one would have other big green machine, I'm sure it does something. I've seen that, but I just thought they were all a nod and a wink thing. I didn't think there would actually be partnerships between farms. Yes,
well, the legislation now provided for milk production partnerships, but a short within the last 12 months or 2 years, and yes, over 650 of those milk production partnerships have been established. So it is something that farmers and young farmers have embraced wholeheartedly. And now they're extending that into beef and maybe other sectors as well.
And so of course, yes, agriculture is a sector that's going well at the moment.
Yes, that traditional metal that you associate with farming is being formalised and continues to exist in real terms.
So are they kind of bulk buying? Would that be part of the process?
Yes, well, bulk buying is probably an optional extra, but the real...
But that's not the focus.
It's not the focus. The focus is to bring together expertise and resources in order to achieve, a more sustainable, longer term farming and agricultural entity.
Just go back to what you said there about tax relief by transferring farms from fathers to son, or to daughters. I should kind of say that as well. Would there be a tax implication on that anyway? I'm just thinking a farm could be worth, I don't know, what would a farm be worth, £1 million? I'm getting too old, I'd pass it on to my son. Now if he has to find 50,000 of tax to pay, well then it suddenly becomes unviable. Does he have to sell a portion of the land, or is that the way it works?
The relief that has been announced is with a view to avoiding the triggering of a tax liability. Obviously there are conditions attached to it in terms of the next generation continuing to farm for a minimum period into the future. There have been reliefs available to facilitate that type of business transfer, not alone among farmers but among businesses generally in the past, and it has been a very successful system, and I'd expect that the once-off nature of the new reliefs that are announced today, I think, will be good.
Very good. I suppose the big talking point will be the local property tax.
Yes.
I won't say it came out of the blue, because it's been heralded for a long time. 1.8%. Sorry, 0.1%. Sorry if I've just caused anyone a heart attack. 0.18% as opposed to 0.5%, which our Lord and Master suggested. Is that an indication that it starts off at 0.18% and is likely to increase over the next years?
There has been an assurance given that there won't be an increase in it, I think, for the next 3 years, which is good news. So the amount has been fixed, the percentage has been fixed. With the new local property tax, in time it is going to replace the household tax, which we're well familiar with during 2012. It continues for a half year into 2013. At which point then the new local property tax will apply for the second half of 2013. So for 2014 then, you're looking at the local property tax and the household tax will have been totally abolished.
So for the first 6 months, am I right in saying you'd pay 50 quid for your household tax? And then for the next 6 months, you'll pay 50% of whatever band your house falls into.
So if your house is worth €100,000 and you calculate the tax on that at 0.018%, I think it works out at, for the half year, about €45. So in total, you'll pay €95 during 2013 for a house worth €100,000.
That's if your house, if you can confirm it, that's what your house is worth. But
Yes.
I'm sure that's going to be a huge problem itself. What is a house worth?
Yes.
How are they going to fix a value? I'm looking at they start off at 90, okay, then they jump up to 225. If you were to get a professional auctioneer to value it, I'm sure his fees would be proportionate anyway.
Yes.
And plus we all know what professional auctioneers' values were like,
Yes. Yeah.
How, again, they probably haven't published the actual details of how they're going to value it, but it's real how long is a piece of string. It's not like your income, where it's self-declaration of your income. You can be spot checked and they can ask to see your books and they say, well look, you either over-declared or under-declared. I don't think anyone ever over-declares,
Yes, yeah.
so I don't know why I said that.
Yeah.
But in a house valuation, particularly in rural houses, it's obviously going to be a very hard thing to actually find. I know the bands at 50, they go up in £50,000
Yes.
jumps. So there's a lot of leeway there, but the difference between £100,000 house and £150,000 house is quite a chunk.
Yeah, well, valuations by their nature are subjective. However, the revenue they indicate, or the minister indicates that the revenue commissioners who are charged with the collection of this new local property tax, that they will issue guidelines in March of 2013, which will set out a formal basis for valuing your house. No idea yet what will be in these guidelines. Typically, and you alluded to it there yourself, the bands are in bands of €50,000. So starting off at 100, not to 100,000 is the first band, but between €100,000 and 1 million, the rates are set in bands of €50,000, and the tax then is charged at the appropriate percentage rate on the midpoint of the band. So typically you're trying to get your value to fall into a band of, say, less than €100,000, a band of 100 to 150, or 150 to €200,000. So the scope is quite wide, right? So while there may be houses that may borderline between some of the band parameters, nevertheless, I think under a self-assessment system, perhaps people may be, I'm not saying pessimistic.
I like that. Perhaps.
Yeah, they may be
tempted, shall we say. Well, I suppose people have been tempted in the past to underdeclare their income. Yeah. And that's one thing, and that's obviously totally illegitimate. But trying to figure out the value of your house, well, I bought it for, 300,000. It's now, what's it worth? 100,000.
Yeah.
The house next door to me has been on the market for 150,000, but it's been on the market for 150,000 for 2 years, and has been it's easy to put a very low value on a house, not out of the attempt to try and defraud tax.
Yeah.
Just put a real world value on it. The fact that, well, if nobody wants it, then it isn't worth.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is, what was it Ronald Reagan said, what's the 8 most hated words and frightening words in the world? I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, And some fellow with a clipboard and tell you, well, your house is worth 200,000. Well, please give me the 200,000, I'll pay off what I owe, and then I'll go somewhere,
It would appear from the text of the minister's speech that the guidelines, when they're issued, will be quite specific and will set out quite a clear roadmap in terms of the valuation of your house. I'm not quite sure what the criteria will be, but the built within the Minister's speech is a guarantee that if you follow the guidelines as laid out, that the revenue will not seek to revisit or reopen the valuation if you use their guidelines. So we would hope that the guidelines, when they're being put together, that they are reasonable and that they are easy to understand, and that it leaves it for an easy and consistent mechanism whereby people can come up with a valuation of their house and to feel, satisfied that in all circumstances it's okay.
Again, I don't know whether it came out, or I don't know whether is it only for personal houses, or are commercial properties subject to it as well?
Commercial properties which are already subject to rates are exempted from the local property tax.
Vale.
So in effect, once you're paying rates, you don't have to worry about local property taxes.
So in other words, you pay rates on commercial properties, but you pay local property tax on houses. It's not rates for houses, of course.
No. There are a number of exemptions from the local property tax. So some of the houses that are exempted include newly constructed and unsold residential property. And in our travels around the country, we will have seen plenty of those. Houses which are vested in a public body or an approved charitable body, they're exempted. And where a principal private residence is unoccupied because somebody has long-term mental or physical infirmity, it's also exempted. There are a number of other exemptions. I suppose the other chief one among them is houses in certain unfinished developments. So I assume this is the ghost estates, again, that have been in the public sector for quite some time.
That was the quickest half hour I've ever spent on anything. We've only got 2 minutes left. So in those 2 minutes, could we run through everything else? The ups and the downs. Okay, obviously some of the downs will be child benefit going down by €10. The
student service charge
going up, and considering they can't get their act together with grants,
yes,
you think with Susie.
The taxation of maternity benefit, I think, is an area that will create a little bit of public interest. And that's a new one.
Yes, Fine Gael, the party of the family. I know the drug treatment scheme has gone up to 144.
Yes.
Do you know if the A&E charge has gone up?
I didn't hear anything on the A&E.
It was the same as it kind of matched the drugs treatment limit. I think it was 132.
Yeah. The prescription charge has increased from 50 cent per prescription to €1.50 per prescription. Quite a significant increase there. The family limit has increased then from €12 to €19.50.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, they say the worst is behind us. Well, of course, next year's budget, of course, will be much better. For no other reason than we'll be 6 months away from local elections.
Yes.
Now, not that that would have any bearing on it, but can we safely say that if the measures that have been put in place that do what they hope to do and raise sufficient money and keep costs down, that it will help the country struggle on it?
Budget 2012 was a particularly severe budget, but yet the economic results for 2012 indicated a national growth of 0.9%, which in all the circumstances was a good achievement. So we would hope that with the additional stimulating effects of the current budget, that 2013 will be a better year, and that at the end of 2013 we hopefully will be in a better place, perhaps not the place we might want to be, but certainly, hopefully, better than where we are now.
Can't ask for better in a better place than that. Well, that's it for tonight's edition, where we looked at the budget. Hopefully you got something out. A huge thanks to Dolan, took time out of his practice, which is probably the busiest day of the year. Well, maybe the second busiest. Perhaps the 31st of October is your busiest day. But I know there's a busy day, and I appreciate you coming down to the studio here and talking through it. I'm Colm Colgan. Do join us next week. So until we meet again, good luck, have a great week, and bye-bye.